A billionaire storms out of a gala, angry, surrounded by cameras, when he spots a homeless girl shivering in the cold. Desperate to escape the press, he blurts, "Pretend to kiss me for 10 minutes." She hesitates, then agrees. But what starts as a fake kiss in the snow turns into something that shakes the whole city. Overnight, the world calls her the woman who melted the billionaire's heart. But no one knows who she really is, or the pain she's hiding behind that brave smile. When fame, lies, and secrets begin to tear them apart, one question remains. Was that kiss just a desperate act, or the beginning of a miracle neither of them saw coming? How far will one lost woman's faith go to change a man who's forgotten how to love? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Snow fell like feathers that night, soft but endless, painting the city in quiet white. Beneath the glowing gold awning of the Royalton Hotel, a young woman huddled close to herself, arms wrapped around a second-hand coat that was 2 sizes too big. Her name was Ember Johnson, and she hadn't slept in a real bed for 3 months. Her hair, once neat and proud, now curled in uneven waves around her cold face. She pressed her back to the wall, feeling the sting of the winter wind sneak through every seam of her coat. The streets outside the hotel glittered with luxury. Black cars lined the curb. Men in tuxedos stepped out, women draped in gowns that shimmered under the lamplight. The doorman greeted each with a smile and a bow. Ember watched them as though from another world. She had once walked into offices with purpose, a social worker trying to help others. Now she sat outside buildings like this one, praying just to stay warm. Her stomach rumbled. She took a sip from a paper cup of coffee gone cold, then whispered, "One more night, God. Just help me make it through one more night." Inside the Royalton, music thundered from the ballroom, a charity gala for hunger relief, though Ember doubted anyone inside knew what real hunger felt like. Crystal chandeliers gleamed overhead as Connor Wycliffe, the billionaire behind the event, forced a polite smile for the flashing cameras. His tuxedo was sharp, his tie straight, but his heart wasn't in it. Connor had learned long ago how to fake composure. It was easier than feeling. His company, Wycliffe Innovations, had just been hit by bad press for laying off 200 workers. The reporters wanted answers, or better yet, a headline that made him the villain. "Mr. Wycliffe!" shouted one voice near the entrance. "Is it true you're cutting jobs to fund your next luxury project?" Another camera flashed in his face. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Not without saying something that would be twisted. "Connor!" his PR director hissed beside him. "Just smile. Don't look angry." But Connor was angry. Not just at them. At the noise. At the pretending. At the way his life had become one long photo shoot where he didn't even recognize the man in the frame. "I need air," he muttered, brushing past the cameras and out the side doors before anyone could stop him. Cold wind hit his face like a slap. His breath came out white in the air as he loosened his tie. The street outside was nearly empty, except for the small shape crouched beneath the awning. At first he thought she was a shadow. Then she lifted her head, and their eyes met. Ember froze. The man's suit, his watch, the clean heat of his presence. It all screamed money. He looked like he didn't belong in her frozen world. But instead of walking past, he stopped in front of her. His jaw was tight, his eyes sharp and restless, like he was running from something invisible. "Hey," he said, his voice low but strained. What's your name?" Ember blinked. "Why?" Behind him, the hotel doors burst open again. Reporters poured out, cameras flashing. Connor looked over his shoulder, panicked. He turned back to her. "Please," he said quickly, stepping closer. "Pretend to kiss me for 10 minutes." Ember stared at him. What? He pulled out his wallet, handed her a crisp $100 bill. Just help me out. 10 minutes, then I'll go. She hesitated, clutching the bill. His eyes weren't cruel. They were desperate. And maybe for once, someone rich needed her for something. So she stood, brushing snow from her coat. 10 minutes? He nodded. She reached up, touched his collar hesitantly. The cameras clicked like thunder. When he leaned down, she caught a whiff of his cologne. Clean, expensive, strangely human. The world around them went silent. The kiss began as an act, but something happened neither expected. For Ember, warmth spread through her chest, cutting through the cold like fire. For Connor, the noise in his mind stopped. Just stopped. When they pulled apart, both looked dazed. The reporters shouted, flashes popping in the night, but neither moved for a moment. Then Ember stepped back, tucking the money into her pocket. "Your 10 minutes are up." She turned and walked into the falling snow. Connor watched her go, heart pounding for reasons that made no sense. The next morning, Ember awoke in her car, a dented old sedan parked behind the community soup kitchen. Her breath fogged the glass. She reached for her phone, but it was dead again. When she climbed out, she stretched, her muscles stiff from another night of sleeping upright. Inside, the kitchen buzzed with volunteers. Ember joined the line to serve breakfast, oatmeal, bread, and coffee for the regulars. She smiled at the faces she knew. Old Mr. Tyrrell, who always told jokes. Lila, the young mother with her 2 little boys. "Morning, Ember," said Denise, the shelter director. "You look better today." Ember laughed softly. "Had a good cup of coffee last night." But when Denise glanced at her phone, her brow furrowed. "Good heavens, that's him." "Who?" Denise turned the screen around. There, in clear color, was Ember, kissing a billionaire. The homeless woman who melted the billionaire's heart. Denise read aloud from the headline. "That's you, isn't it?" Ember's cheeks burned. "Oh no." The kitchen filled with murmurs. Some volunteers smiled, others whispered. Ember wanted to disappear. Across the city, Connor sat at his office desk, watching the same photo on his tablet. The image was everywhere, on news sites, gossip blogs, even the morning talk shows. For once, the story wasn't about layoffs or scandal. It was about him and the mysterious girl who kissed him in the snow. "Connor," said his PR director, Marla, storming into the room. "This is gold. Your approval rating just spiked 20 points overnight. Whoever that woman is, we need her back." He frowned. "She's not a marketing strategy." "She's a miracle," Marla said. "Find her. We'll turn this into a campaign." Connor stood, his patience thin. "We're not doing that." "Then what are we doing?" He looked out the window, down at the busy streets below. "I don't know," he said quietly. "But I need to find her." That evening, in a quiet apartment uptown, Ruth Ann Wycliffe, Connor's mother, watched the same footage on her television. Her son, kissing a homeless girl in the snow, looked alive in a way she hadn't seen in years. She smiled softly, whispering, "God's got his hands on this, Connor. I can feel it." She picked up the phone and called him. "You looked happy in that photo," she said gently. He sighed. "It wasn't real, Mom. Just a mess I made." "Maybe so," she replied, "but sometimes God hides blessings in the mess." 2 days later, Ember was sorting donated clothes at the shelter when a black car pulled up outside. The volunteers stared. Connor stepped out, looking uncomfortable in his tailored coat. Snowflakes dotted his hair as he walked straight toward her. "Miss Johnson?" he said softly. Her heart dropped. "You found me?" He nodded. "I wanted to thank you. And I wanted to ask something." The volunteers gathered around, pretending not to eavesdrop. He took a breath. I have a big investor event coming up next week. The board wants me to appear grounded, human. I told them no, but... He hesitated, embarrassed. They won't stop asking about you. So what do you want from me? She asked. He met her eyes. Pretend to be my girlfriend, just for a week. I'll pay well. Ember froze. You want me to pretend again? Just this once. It would help both of us. She crossed her arms. Do you even hear yourself? You're asking a homeless woman to fake being your partner for a week. For money. He flinched. I didn't mean it that way. Yes, you did. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I'm sorry. He pulled a card from his pocket and set it on the counter. If you change your mind, call me. Then he left. Ember stared at the card for a long time. The volunteers whispered around her. She wanted to throw it away, but she didn't. That night, when the shelter's furnace broke and the director told everyone they might have to shut down for repairs, Ember overheard a whisper between two volunteers. Wycliffe Industries funds half our operations. One said, if they pull out, we're done. Ember stared at the flickering heater light and thought of Connor's tired eyes. By morning, she picked up the phone. Mr. Wycliffe. She said quietly when he answered. I'll do it. That evening, Connor stood in the foyer of his mansion as a car pulled up the drive. Ember stepped out, clutching a small bag, her eyes wide at the sight of the grand home. Welcome, he said awkwardly. She nodded, glancing up at the towering staircase. You live here alone? My mother's here, he said, and too many people who get paid to act like they care. She smiled faintly. Then maybe I'll fit right in. Ruth Ann appeared from the sitting room, her smile bright and kind. So you're the young woman my son can't stop talking about. Mom, Connor muttered. Ember blushed. It's nice to meet you, Mom. Oh, call me Ruth Ann, she said warmly, taking Ember's hands. You must be freezing. Come sit by the fire. That night, they ate dinner together. Awkwardly at first, then with surprising ease. Ruth Ann's stories filled the silence. Ember found herself laughing for the first time in months. When Ruth Ann excused herself to rest, Ember stood to help clear the table. You don't have to do that, Connor said. I know, she said, stacking the plates anyway. But I like to help. He watched her for a long moment. Why did you say yes? She paused. Because your company keeps a lot of people warm, and I can't stand to see the shelter close. Connor's voice softened. You're doing this for them? She shrugged. Maybe for both of us. Later, when Ember finally went to bed in the guest room, she knelt beside the soft white sheets and whispered, Thank you, God, for giving me one more chance. Down the hall, Connor stood by his window, looking out at the snow-covered city. He could still hear her quiet voice in his mind, a melody of faith he'd forgotten long ago. For the first time in years, he smiled. And for the first time in her life, Ember dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over yet. Morning came soft and grey, the kind that made the city feel slow and hushed. Ember woke to the quiet tick of a large wall clock and a faint smell of coffee drifting down the hall. For a moment, she did not move. The bed under her was deep and warm, the sheets white and smooth, so different from the scratchy blanket in her car. Sunlight pushed through tall curtains and laid a pale stripe across the floor. She lay still, listening. No street noise, no sirens, no coughs from the alley. Just the breath of heat through vents and the faraway click of someone's shoes on marble. She rose, feet sinking into a thick rug, and stood at the window. The yard looked like a white quilt, trees holding out their bare arms. The driveway curved down toward big iron gates. A security booth sat beyond, empty at the moment. It all felt quiet in a way that seemed to have weight. She pressed a palm to the cold glass and then let the curtain fall back. On the nightstand sat a note in neat handwriting. Guest breakfast is served until 10. If you wake earlier, the kitchen is open. Ruth Ann. Ember smiled. She washed her face, ran her fingers through her hair, and braided it back. She smoothed her second-hand sweater and the clean jeans the shelter had given her last month. Then she opened her door and stepped into a long hallway lined with family photos in silver frames. She paused at one, a younger Connor standing beside a woman with gentle eyes. Their shoulders touched. The woman's smile made Ember's chest ache. She moved on before she felt like a thief looking at a life that was not hers. The kitchen waited at the end of a side corridor. Gleaming metal, wide counters, a stove that looked like it could feed an army. A man in a black vest stood at the sink, sleeves rolled, rinsing berries in a colander. He turned at once, face open and kind. "Good morning," he said. "You must be our guest." "Good morning," Ember said, unsure whether she should step forward or stand still. I'm up early." "So am I," he said with a grin that creased his eyes. "Name's Harold. I drive for the family, but I come in early when Mrs. Wycliffe wants coffee that tastes like coffee and not like burnt water." Ember laughed before she could help it. "I'll try not to get in the way." "Impossible," Harold said, handing her a mug. "Cream's right there. Sugar if you like it sweet." She wrapped both hands around the warm cup. The first sip sent heat down to her toes. She leaned on the edge of a stool and watched Harold work. He moved with a calm rhythm, like a man who had learned to do things right the first time and not rush. Another door swung open and a woman stepped in. Tall, trim, early 50s, hair pulled tight, expression pulled tighter. "Miss Johnson," she said. "I'm Lydia, house manager. If you require anything, you may ask me. House rules are on the credenza in the guest sitting room." She set a thin booklet on the counter and slid it toward Ember without meeting her eyes. "No food in the bedrooms, no deliveries, no unapproved visitors. Please sign the intake sheet." Ember nodded, throat dry. "Yes, ma'am." Lydia's gaze flicked over Ember's clothes and then away. "Breakfast is served at 9 in the family dining room. A stylist will arrive at 10. There will be a fitting in the east parlor. Chef has a list of allergies. Please circle yours." Ember uncapped the pen and circled none. Lydia gave a clipped nod and left, the door swishing closed behind her. Harold let out a breath so soft it was almost a laugh. Don't mind her. She was born with good posture and a list in her pocket. She's loyal, just needs time. Ember folded the paper booklet without opening it. "Time is fine," she said, and took another sip of coffee to steady her hands. By 9, Ember stood just outside the dining room, palms pressed flat against her thighs. She could hear low voices inside, china clinking, a chair sliding. She drew one deep breath and stepped through. The room held a long table under a chandelier shaped like falling raindrops. At the head sat Ruth Ann in a cozy blue sweater, a silk scarf tied at her neck. She turned at the sound of Ember's feet, her face bright. "There she is," Ruth Ann said. "Bless your heart, child, you're up early." She stood and opened her arms as if Ember were a niece she loved and had been waiting on all morning. "Come sit by me." Ember took the chair beside her. A server poured juice and set a plate in front of her. Scrambled eggs, fruit, toast cut into triangles. Connor walked in a moment later, rolling his sleeves, hair still damp from a shower, tie hanging undone around his neck. He stopped when he saw Ember and then smiled, a small, honest thing that changed his face. "Good morning." he said. "Good morning," she said back. He sat across from them, glanced at his phone, then flipped it face down as if he'd made a promise to himself. Ruth Ann patted Ember's hand and nodded at the food. "Eat before it cools. A cold breakfast is a sin I will not answer for." Ember took a bite. The eggs were soft and buttery. She had to fight the urge to close her eyes so she would not embarrass herself. When she looked up, Ruth Ann was watching her, not with pity, but with a joy that made Ember want to sit up straighter. "Miss Johnson," Connor said, awkward at first, "I hope you slept well." "I did," Ember said. "Thank you for the note, Mrs. Wycliffe. The kitchen is very nice." "Ember," Ruth Ann corrected gently. "If you don't call me Ruth Ann, I'll tell every story I know about my son, and there are many." Ember smiled. Connor groaned. The ice at the table cracked and drifted away. They ate for a few minutes. The quiet was not stiff now. It felt like a blanket shared between friends. Connor broke it first. "I want to be clear about the plan," he said. "Marla, you'll meet her today, has put together a schedule for the next week. 2 appearances, 1 gala, 1 private dinner with investors. We'll need to coordinate." Ember set down her fork and folded her hands. "I'll help with what we agreed. I'll smile. I'll stand where I'm told. But I won't lie about who I am." He met her eyes. "I don't want you to lie." "Good," she said softly, "because I don't know how." Ruth Ann's lips curved as if she had just watched a sunrise. "There's more truth at this table already than we had in this house all last year." Footsteps approached. Lydia reappeared in the doorway. "Mr. Wycliffe, Ms. Green is here." "Marla?" Connor said, checking his watch. "She's early." He rose and looked to Ember. "We'll meet in the East Parlour in 15 minutes?" Ember nodded. "I'll be there." When he left, Ruth Ann leaned close. "He means well. He just wraps it in metal first so it doesn't get stolen." Ember laughed under her breath. "I've met people like that at the shelter. Sometimes the softest hearts wear the thickest coats." Ruth Ann squeezed her fingers. And sometimes God sends someone brave enough to knock." The East Parlour looked like a room in a museum. High ceilings painted with quiet flowers, wide windows catching the snow glow, sofas you wanted to sit on but felt you should not. Marla stood by the mantel, a tablet in her hand, sharp black dress, sharp smile. "Miss Johnson," she said, offering a handshake that was more test than welcome. "I'm Marla Green. I keep this ship off the rocks." Ember shook her hand. "Nice to meet you." "Let's be practical," Marla said, tapping the tablet. "First event is a dinner tomorrow night. 20 guests. No press inside. Photos as you arrive and exit. We keep it simple. Look polished. Smile. Keep answers short." "Short I can do," Ember said. Marla's eyes flicked to Ember's sweater. "Stylist will handle wardrobe." She swiped to the next page. "Second event is a charity gala on Thursday. Press wall, live stream, donor interviews. We will give you 4 talking points. Please stick to them. No ad-libbing." Ruth Ann, seated by the window with her knitting, looked up. "She has a mind of her own, Marla. Let the girl use it." Marla didn't look away from the screen. Of course, within reason. Connor watched the back and forth, jaw tight. "We're not building a robot." Marla's smile thinned. "We're managing risk." Ember spoke before the air could turn to glass. "I don't want to make trouble. I understand why you need a plan, but I won't pretend to be something I'm not. If someone asks me a direct question, I'll answer it as kindly as I can." Marla assessed her a beat longer than was polite, and then nodded, as if Ember had passed a test she had not known she was taking. "Fine. Kind and simple. That plays well." She turned a page and slid the tablet into a bag. "Stylist is in the West Hall. Let's get you ready." The stylist, Nora, a woman with bright eyes and a tape measure around her neck, greeted Ember with a small clap of delight. "You're gorgeous," she said, meaning it. "We'll keep you. You. Just polished. Think clean lines, warm tones, nothing that says borrowed." They tried on a dress for the dinner, a soft dove grey that felt like water and fell at the calf. Nora paired it with boots that looked like they had no business being comfortable but were. For the gala, Nora chose a deep blue gown with a simple neckline and sleeves that made Ember feel like she had a right to be seen. When Ember worried out loud, Nora shook her head. "You don't need sequins," she said. "You need air. We'll let you breathe." On the way back to the parlour, Ember and Nora passed a pair of tall windows that looked out over the side yard. A man knelt beside a short brick wall, a tool in his hand, white breath spooling from his mouth. Water had frozen inside a narrow pipe and split it near the valve. He worked with steady hands, shoulders hunched against the cold. "Is he the gardener?" Ember asked. Nora peered out. "Miguel. He keeps this place alive when the weather tries to kill it." Ember hesitated. "Can I—" Nora smiled like someone who had seen a lot of people ask for nothing and felt good when someone asked for a chance to help. "Go on." Ember slipped out a side door into the bright cold. Snow squeaked under her boots. She crouched beside Miguel, careful not to startle him. "Hi," she said. "Need a hand?" He glanced up, surprised. Then he saw the honesty in her eyes and nodded once. "Hold this," he said, handing her a small flashlight. "Right there, thank you." They worked in silence. Ember's breath fogged the light. Miguel wrapped the pipe with a heating cord and insulation, hands sure, movements gentle. Ember thought of all the small repairs that kept a place warm and running, the ones no one noticed unless they failed. When he finished, he tested the valve. The pipe held. He sat back on his heels. "Gracias," he said. "De nada," she said softly, the old-school Spanish rising like a friend. He studied her a second longer. "You're the girl," he said at last. "From the picture." Ember felt the old heat in her cheeks. "Yes." He nodded toward the house. "They will talk. Let them. Cold wind talks too, but it cannot break a brick that's set right." She smiled. "I'll try to be a brick then." He grinned. "You already are." Back inside, Marla glanced at Ember's pink ears and shook her head. "Try not to disappear without telling anyone. We have eyes on the gates. There's press now." They crossed the foyer. Through the glass of the front doors, Ember saw the first van, the long black nose of a camera sitting on its shoulder like a bird. A man in a wool hat spoke into a microphone, and the wind threw his scarf across his face. Ember's stomach dipped. Connor followed her gaze. "We'll keep you away from that for now," he said. "No interviews today." "Good," Ember said, breathing again. "I'm not ready to talk to the whole world." In the afternoon, Marla set Ember up in a quiet library with a notebook of guidelines. Ember read the first page. Be yourself. Be kind. Smile. And relaxed. The rest covered simple questions she might face. How did you meet? What did you feel? What comes next? She practiced answers out loud, small and honest. "We met outside a hotel. It was cold. He asked me to help. And I did. I felt warm for the first time in a while. What comes next? Dinner, I guess. And a lot of listening." Ruth Ann appeared in the doorway before dinner, a light blanket around her shoulders. "Walk with me," she said. They moved slowly down the hall, stopping at the picture Ember had noticed that morning. The woman with gentle eyes smiled forever in silver. "That's Lily," Ruth Ann said. "Connor's wife. She died 3 years ago. Car crash. The other driver fell asleep at the wheel. Some things break that never should. Ember's throat hurt. I'm sorry. So am I, Ruth Ann said. He stopped singing after that, stopped going where songs were. He kept the world running with his hands, but let his heart sit outside in the cold. Ember looked at the photo. She looks kind. She was. Ruth Ann said. You are too. They stood together a minute, not needing more words. Then Ruth Ann nodded toward the stairs. Dinner, she said. It won't eat itself. The dining room felt warmer that evening, as if the house had heard their laughter at breakfast and decided it could trust them. Harold told a story about a snowstorm in Montana and a stubborn rental car that had tried to die on a mountain road. Lydia brought in bowls of soup and never smiled, but she set a small plate of extra bread near Ember's elbow, and Ember took it as the gift it was. When dessert came, baked apples stuffed with walnuts and raisins, Connor cleared his throat. Tomorrow is the private dinner, he said calmly, as if his pulse did not quicken when he thought about it. We'll leave at 6. Dresses, whatever Nora put you in, he said, waving a hand at Ember's confusion about terms. You won't have to speak publicly. Just be with me. I can do that, Ember said. After dinner, Ruth Ann stood with her hands on the back of her chair. Now I'm going to make a request, she said. Sunday is 2 days away. I want both of you in church with me. No press, no fuss. We'll slip in late and sit in the back if we have to. I don't want to go alone. Ember answered without thinking. I'll go. Connor looked from his mother to Ember and back again. He let out a slow breath. All right, he said. We'll go. Ruth Ann's smile lifted the room a little higher. Night deepened. The house settled. Ember carried her notebook back to her room and set it on the desk. She walked to the window and opened the curtain. The yard lay silent under the moon, the pipe in the side yard wrapped like a wound tended with care. She pressed her forehead to the cool glass. Her phone, charged at last, buzzed on the nightstand. She picked it up. Messages blinked on the screen. Are you okay? From Lila at the shelter. Proud of you. From Denise. And then a news link from a number she didn't know. The mystery kiss that melted a billionaire. Ember set the phone face down. She could not read it. Not tonight. A soft knock came at the door. It's Connor, his voice said low. Ember opened it. He stood in the hall in shirt sleeves, tie gone, hair a little untidy. He looked less like a man on a magazine cover and more like a young father asking a neighbor to keep an eye on his child. Breakable. Human. I wanted to check that you're okay, he said. Marla says the press will camp out for a while. We'll keep you off the radar until tomorrow night. I'm okay, she said. Thank you. He nodded and didn't move, and the silence wrapped around them like a wool scarf. Ember felt a strange calm grow between them. She spoke before fear could swallow it. When I was a kid, she said, my mum and I used to sing at night. Old hymns. She said it made the walls remember love. Sometimes it helped. Sometimes it just made us cry. Connor's mouth trembled. Lily loved hymns, he said. After she died, I turned off the music in this house. It was easier not to feel it. Ember's voice fell softer. Maybe it's time to turn it back on. He looked at the floor and then up at her again. Would you sing something? Just a little if you want. If not, it's fine. I don't know why I asked. Ember had sung to walls that leaked and cars that rattled like cans in a bag. She had sung to the worried faces at the shelter when the line ran out of bread. She took a small breath and began, almost a hum at first, then words warm and plain. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Her voice travelled into the hall and out across the dark house. It was not fancy. It was a clear stream in winter. It moved past Connor and touched the family photos, ran the length of the floor, and slipped under doors. Somewhere downstairs, Ruth Ann sat in a chair and closed her eyes, smiling as if she had heard a door open that had been stuck for years. When Ember finished, the quiet rang with it. Connor's eyes were wet. He swallowed. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome," she said, and she meant for more than the song. He stepped back. "Good night, Ember. Good night, Connor." She closed the door and stood with her back to it for a long time. The room smelled faintly of cinnamon from the baked apples and of winter air from her open curtain. She went to the desk, pulled the blanket from the chair, and laid it over the bed. Before she turned off the light, she knelt beside the mattress, hands folded on the coverlet, and spoke in a whisper. "Thank you for giving me work to do tomorrow. Please keep me kind when it's hard. And please help him find his way home." Down the hall, Connor stood by the window in his room. He looked out at the sweep of the yard, the glint of the security lights on the iron gate, and then turned his gaze inward, toward the parts of himself he had left in cold storage. He pulled his phone from his pocket, opened a note, and typed a sentence he had not expected to write. "Call Denise at the shelter. Ask what they need most this month." He saved it, put the phone down, and turned off the lamp. The house breathed around him. Far outside, cameras waited by the road, their red lights blinking like small, patient hearts. Inside, another light, the kind that didn't show up in wires or screens, had been struck. He lay down, closed his eyes, and listened to the echo of a hymn folding him into sleep. The steady sound of it made him feel, for the first time in a long time, like morning would actually come. And when it did, there would be a schedule, and a stylist, and a dinner to survive. There would also be coffee in the kitchen, and Harold's quiet jokes, and Ruth Ann's scarf catching the light, and a girl who had sung grace into a silent house. There would be fear in his chest and hope beside it, both walking, both learning to share the same space. The clocks ticked. The furnace hummed. Snow fell. The house, with all its rooms, felt a little less empty. The next evening arrived with a thin layer of frost that glazed every window and branch in silver. The city lights blinked through it like distant stars. Ember stood before the full-length mirror in the guest room, smoothing the soft grey dress Nora had tailored for her. It fit as if it had been waiting for her somewhere all along, simple, elegant, forgiving. She turned once, then again, nerves fluttering like wings inside her chest. Downstairs, the sound of quiet piano drifted from a speaker. Ruth Ann's laughter floated above it, warm and light. Ember took one last deep breath, whispered, "Help me be brave, Lord," and stepped into the hallway. Connor waited at the bottom of the grand staircase in a dark suit. His hair was brushed neatly, his tie straight this time, but something about him looked less rigid, like he'd spent the day fighting with his reflection and won a small truce. When he looked up and saw Ember, his face softened. "You look—" He hesitated, the words catching. "You look perfect." She smiled, shy but steady. "You clean up pretty well yourself." From the sitting room, Ruth Ann called out, "Don't just stand there staring, Connor. You'll make her nervous before the car even leaves." He cleared his throat, chuckling under his breath. "She's right. Ready? As I'll ever be." Harold held the door open for them as they stepped outside. The night air nipped at their cheeks. A long black sedan waited, gleaming under the porch lights. Connor offered his arm, and for the first time, Ember took it. Not as part of an act, but because she wanted to. In the car, the city stretched before them like a glittering promise. The streets pulsed with light, and Ember found herself staring out the window, trying to soak it in. She hadn't been in this part of town since before her mother got sick. Back then, she'd walked these same streets carrying a clipboard and a smile, trying to make a difference one family at a time. "You okay?" Connor asked, watching her reflection in the glass. She nodded. "Just feels like a dream I woke up back into." He understood more than he said. "Tonight will be fine," he assured. "They'll love you." Ember gave a quiet laugh. "They don't even know me. They'll see what I see." She turned her head. "And what's that?" Connor hesitated again, his voice dropping. "Someone real." Before she could answer, the car slowed in front of a glowing building. The restaurant was elegant but understated, with ivy twining around the entrance and soft yellow light spilling through the windows. Cameras flashed as soon as the doors opened. Ember's pulse spiked. She felt Connor's hand cover hers, steady and sure. "Just breathe," he said. "We walk in together." She nodded. Together. They stepped out, flashbulbs popping like summer lightning. Connor led her through the entrance where hosts greeted them by name. The dining room glowed with golden warmth, chandeliers reflecting on crystal glasses. Long tables held small clusters of investors, philanthropists, and business elites. Laughter rose and fell in practiced rhythm. Connor leaned close. "Remember, you're my guest, not my project. Enjoy the food. You're allowed." Ember smiled. "I'll try." Marla appeared from nowhere, sleek and efficient. "Perfect timing," she whispered. "Connor, your table's ready. Remember, short answers. Smile for at least 2 photos." "Thank you, Marla," he said dryly. They reached their table, a round one near the front, close enough for attention but not the spotlight. Connor pulled out Ember's chair. Across from them sat Marcus Layton, one of Connor's oldest investors, a man whose smile looked more like a challenge. "So this is the famous mystery woman," Marcus said, raising his glass. "The internet sweetheart." Ember smiled politely. "Nice to meet you." "Pleasure's mine," he said, though his eyes scanned her like he was reading fine print. "Connor, you've got the world guessing who she is, and now we find out she's real." His grin turned sly. "Tell me, did you pull her out of a movie set?" Connor's tone cooled. "Out of the snow, actually." Marcus chuckled, missing, or ignoring, the edge in his voice. "Well, she cleans up nice. Don't get too attached. These things tend to melt under the spotlight." Ember felt her cheeks warm, but she held her composure. "Snow melts," she said calmly, "but water finds its way back home." For the first time, Marcus looked caught off guard. Ruth Ann, sitting at another table nearby, overheard and beamed. The waiter arrived, saving them from further tension. Ember relaxed as she studied the menu. Small print, foreign words, but Connor leaned close, whispering translations. "That one's chicken. That one's fish. That one's something you shouldn't try unless you like regrets." She laughed softly. "Then chicken it is." The dinner unfolded in slow waves of conversation and polite laughter. Connor spoke of projects, investments, and charity initiatives. When Ember was drawn in, she listened more than she spoke, answering with honesty when asked. A woman beside her leaned over, curious. "So, dear, how did you and Mr. Wycliffe meet?" Ember smiled gently. "Outside a hotel, in the snow." The woman laughed, thinking it a joke. "Romantic." "It wasn't at first," Ember said with a small shrug. "But sometimes God writes stories we wouldn't dare begin ourselves." There was a pause, then warm laughter. Connor looked at her with quiet awe. Somehow she'd taken a question meant to expose and turned it into something pure. By dessert, Ember's nerves had faded into calm. Connor noticed the way she listened to others. Not just waiting for her turn to talk, but truly hearing them. He hadn't realized how rare that was until tonight. When the dinner ended and they stepped outside again, the night was quiet. The flashes gone. The car pulled up, and for the first time neither of them rushed to get in. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For reminding me that people can still surprise me." She smiled. "That goes both ways." Inside the car, the city rolled by in streaks of light. Ember leaned her head against the window, exhaustion creeping in. Connor watched her reflection, peaceful, honest, unguarded. When they reached the estate, Ruth Ann waited up with a mug of tea. "How did it go?" she asked, eyes bright. "Better than I deserved," Connor said. Ember smiled. "Everyone was kind. Well, mostly everyone." Ruth Ann chuckled. "Marcus Layton hasn't been kind since 1997. Ignore him." Ember yawned, covering her mouth. "I think I will." Connor looked at her, something like gratitude in his eyes. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we plan for the gala." She nodded, bidding them both good night. Upstairs, Ember stood before her window again, watching the snow drift under the moonlight. She thought of the way people looked at her tonight, some curious, some skeptical, but a few kind. It felt strange to be seen again. She pulled the blanket around her shoulders and whispered, "Thank you for helping me not break." Downstairs, Ruth Ann turned to her son, her tone teasing but tender. "You've got that look, Connor." "What look?" "The one a man gets when he's finally remembering what his heart is for." He shook his head, smiling faintly. "She's different, Mom." Ruth Ann's gaze softened. Different is usually what saves us. Connor looked toward the staircase Ember had climbed minutes before. Somewhere deep inside, something long asleep stirred. A sense of purpose, fragile but alive. Outside, snow fell again, quietly covering the footprints that led to this strange new beginning. Morning sunlight spilled through the long windows of the Wycliffe mansion, painting gold streaks across the marble floor. The house was quiet, except for the slow tick of a grandfather clock and the faint smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Ember walked down the staircase, her bare hand gliding over the smooth rail, her heart lighter than it had been in years. The dinner had gone better than she ever imagined. It hadn't just been an act anymore. For the first time, she felt seen not as a burden, but as someone who mattered. In the kitchen, Harold was already pouring coffee into delicate china cups. "Morning, sunshine," he said, grinning. "You survived the dinner." Ember smiled, sitting at the counter. "Barely, but I think I passed the test." "Passed? You aced it? Mrs. Wycliffe said you handled those fancy folks like a pro. Even made that grumpy Marcus fella look like he'd swallowed a lemon." Ember laughed, shaking her head. "I just told the truth." Harold winked. "That's why it worked. Truth's a rare luxury in rooms like that." Ruth Ann appeared moments later, wrapped in her soft blue robe and a silk scarf. "Well, my dear, you were splendid last night," she said warmly. "Half those people couldn't stop talking about you. You made my son proud, even if he'll never admit it before breakfast." Ember blushed. "I just tried not to embarrass him." Ruth Ann chuckled. "You did far more than that, darling. You made him look human again." Before Ember could answer, the morning's peace broke. Marla swept into the kitchen, phone in hand, her heels clicking like punctuation marks. "We have a problem," she announced sharply. Connor followed her in, already buttoning his jacket. His face was calm, but his eyes betrayed unease. "What happened?" Marla held out her phone. "You two are everywhere. Pictures, videos, every outlet has them. The stories exploded overnight." She scrolled through article headlines as she spoke. from street to spotlight, the billionaire's mystery woman. 10 minutes that changed everything. Connor Wycliffe's angel in grey. Ember stared, her stomach sinking. Oh no. Marla continued briskly. The gala's in 2 days, and this publicity storm is both a blessing and a curse. Every reporter in Chicago wants an interview. Half the internet thinks it's a fairy tale. The other half thinks it's a setup. Ruth Ann crossed her arms. Then we tell them the truth. Marla raised a brow. Which version? The truth or the one that sells? Connor's voice sharpened. Enough, Marla. She's not a product. Marla bit her tongue, but didn't back down. Public perception matters, Connor. If this turns into a scandal, your investors— I don't care about investors right now. Ember shifted uncomfortably. Maybe I should just disappear for a few days. No, Connor said quickly, surprising even himself. You're not hiding. You've done nothing wrong. Harold set down the coffee pot with a firm clink. That's right. Let the vultures squawk. Folks who know the truth don't need to shout it. Ruth Ann smiled at him approvingly. Well said, Harold. Marla sighed. Fine. But at least let me control the narrative. We'll post a short video statement, just you two saying you're friends, nothing scandalous, nothing romantic. Ember frowned. But isn't pretending again just another lie? Connor met her gaze. She's right. No statements. Marla's lips thinned. This is madness. Maybe, Ruth Ann said with quiet strength. But it's honest madness, and I'll take that any day. Marla muttered something under her breath and stormed out, phone buzzing like a hornet in her hand. The room exhaled. Connor rubbed his temples. Sorry you had to see that. She means well, but she thinks life is one long press release. Ember smiled gently. I've seen worse arguments at the soup kitchen. That made him laugh, a soft, real laugh that warmed the air. I believe you. Ruth Ann sipped her coffee. What you both need, she said, is a day out of this house before the gala madness begins. Take a drive, breathe some fresh air, go somewhere where nobody cares who you are. Ember hesitated. You mean, together? Exactly, Ruth Ann said with a knowing grin. I'm not asking, I'm telling. By late morning, Connor's sleek black SUV rolled down a winding road that left the city behind. The skyline faded into distant grey, replaced by rolling fields dusted with snow. Ember leaned her head towards the window, watching the world widen. For the first time in months, she saw open land instead of walls, fences, or concrete. This is beautiful, she murmured. I come here sometimes, Connor said quietly, when I need to think. They reached a frozen lake surrounded by pine trees. The air smelled sharp and clean. Connor parked near the shore. The world was still except for the crunch of their boots on snow. Ember pulled her scarf tight. So this is where billionaires hide. He smiled faintly. Where people hide. I guess that's what I've been doing. She glanced at him. From what? He looked out over the lake. Myself, mostly. They walked in silence for a while, the sound of their steps rhythmic and steady. Ember felt something loosen in her chest. Out here, he wasn't Mr. Wycliffe, the billionaire with guards and schedules. He was just a man trying to find peace. I didn't expect any of this, Ember said softly. Not the kiss, not the headlines, not you. Neither did I, he admitted. You turned one mistake into something I can't stop thinking about. She laughed gently. Guess we're both learning how fast life can change. A gust of wind scattered snowflakes between them. Connor turned towards her. Can I tell you something? Of course. When you sang last night. He paused, searching for the right words. I haven't heard music in this house since Lily died. I didn't realize how much I missed it until I heard your voice. Her eyes softened. I didn't mean to stir up old pain. It's not pain, he said. It's life. They stood there for a long moment, the silence between them gentle and whole. By afternoon they returned to the city. The peace of the lake felt fragile against the noise of traffic. As they neared the estate gates, Connor's phone buzzed again. Marla. He ignored it. But Ember's phone, an older model she'd finally charged, began to buzz too. She checked the screen and froze. What's wrong? Connor asked. It's Denise, from the shelter. She answered quickly. Denise, are you okay? Through the crackling line, Denise's voice trembled. Ember, honey, the furnace gave out again. We're trying to keep everyone warm, but we need help. I'll come, Ember said instantly. I'll figure something out. When she hung up, Connor was already pulling over. The shelter's in trouble. She nodded. They might have to shut down tonight. He grabbed his coat. Then let's fix it. Her brow furrowed. You don't have to. I want to. An hour later, they pulled up outside the familiar brick building where Ember had spent so many nights. Smoke puffed weakly from the chimney, and the windows glowed dim with candle light. Inside, the air was cold, but laughter still rose from the small crowd huddled together for warmth. Denise rushed forward, relief flooding her face when she saw Ember. Sweetheart, you came. Oh, and you brought company. Connor shook her hand. I'm here to help. Can you fix a furnace? She teased, half serious. He smiled. No, but I can pay someone who can. Within minutes, he was on the phone arranging an emergency repair. Ember helped pass out blankets while the children gathered near a small heater. When Connor hung up, she looked at him with quiet gratitude. Thank you, she said. You didn't have to. Maybe not, he said, but I wanted to see where your strength comes from. Ember looked around the room, the people sharing soup, the laughter despite the cold, and smiled. Then now you know. The furnace rumbled back to life an hour later, and warmth began to spread through the shelter. The children cheered. Denise wiped tears from her eyes. You two are angels, she said. Ember shook her head. Just people trying to help. When they left, snow began falling again, gentle and slow. Connor opened the car door for her, but she hesitated, looking back at the shelter. You miss this place, don't you? He asked. I never stopped belonging to it, she said softly. Connor followed her gaze. Maybe you don't have to choose between your old world and mine, she smiled faintly. Maybe neither of us does. They drove home under a sky dusted with stars. The city lights faded behind them, and for the first time since everything began, Ember felt peace settle into her bones. Not the peace of stillness, but of purpose. At the mansion gate, Ruth Ann waited in the doorway despite the cold, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. When she saw them step out, cheeks flushed and eyes shining, she smiled knowingly. I told you, she said, her voice warm. Go out into the world, and it'll remind you who you are. Ember reached up and hugged her. You were right. Ruth Ann chuckled. Of course I was. As Ember disappeared down the hall toward her room, Ruth Ann looked at her son. It's happening, isn't it? He pretended not to know what she meant. What is? The thaw, she said simply. You're coming back to life. Connor didn't answer, but his mother didn't need him to. She saw it in his eyes, the first signs of spring breaking through the long, frozen winter. Morning broke with a soft glow over the Wycliffe estate. Birds perched on the snow-dusted branches outside Ember's window, chirping like they'd never heard of cold or worry. She sat on the edge of her bed, brushing out her hair and thinking about the night before, the shelter's laughter, Connor's hands steady on the broken furnace valve, and the quiet ride home filled with something that felt dangerously close to peace. She wasn't sure what was changing, but she could feel it. The pretending no longer felt like pretending. Downstairs, Ruth Ann sat at the breakfast table wrapped in a blanket shawl, humming softly. Connor stood by the window, reading from a tablet, but not really seeing the words. His mind was elsewhere, on the girl upstairs whose laugh had stayed with him all night. When Ember appeared in the doorway, Ruth Ann's eyes brightened. "Well, good morning, sunshine. I was just saying how quiet this house gets when you sleep in." Ember smiled, taking a seat. It's still strange waking up somewhere warm. Connor looked up from the tablet. "You made quite the impression at the shelter last night. Denise called me this morning to thank you again." Ember laughed softly. "She should thank you. You were the one who saved the day." He shook his head. "You were the one who showed up." For a brief moment, their eyes met. And Ruth Ann, pretending to butter her toast, caught the look. She smiled quietly to herself. Before anyone could say more, Marla stormed into the room, holding a phone like it was a weapon. "We've got an issue," she said sharply. "The press found out about the shelter visit." Connor frowned. "How?" "Someone posted pictures on social media, one of you handing out blankets. It's blowing up again. Half the world thinks you're a saint and the other half says you staged it for PR." Ember's heart sank. "But it wasn't staged." "I know that," Marla said, scrolling through her feed, "but the internet doesn't." Connor's jaw tightened. "Then we'll tell the truth. No interviews, no spin, just honesty." Marla pinched the bridge of her nose. "You're making my job impossible." "Then maybe your job needs to change," Connor said calmly. Ruth Ann chuckled softly. Honesty never did ruin anyone worth remembering. Marla sighed in frustration and stormed out again. When the kitchen door shut behind her, silence lingered for a moment. Ember exhaled. "I'm sorry I caused all this trouble." Connor's voice softened. "You didn't cause it. You reminded me what matters." Ruth Ann smiled like a cat who'd just heard the ending to a good story. "Well, before you two save the world again, we've got a church service to attend tomorrow, and I won't hear a word of protest." Sunday morning came bright and cold. The little country church near the edge of town looked like something from a painting. White steeple, frosted windows, smoke rising from the chimney. Connor parked the car quietly, the tires crunching through the thin snow. Ember looked out the window. "It's been a long time since I've been to church." Connor gave a faint smile. "Same here." Ruth Ann leaned forward from the back seat. "Well, God's not keeping score. He's just happy to see you walk in." Inside, the pews were half full, the air thick with the smell of wood polish and coffee from the fellowship hall. The pastor, an older man with a kind face, greeted them with a warm handshake. "Good to see you again, Ruth Ann," he said. "You brought family?" Ruth Ann smiled, patting Ember's arm. "Something like that." They sat near the middle, not wanting to draw attention. But halfway through the service, someone whispered, "Isn't that Connor Wycliffe?" Heads began to turn. Ember felt her chest tighten. But when the pastor began the final hymn, "How Great Thou Art," she forgot about the stairs. Her voice joined the music, clear and rich. The melody lifted over the congregation like sunlight. Connor turned slightly, watching her sing. Something inside him broke open, something that had been sealed since the day Lily died. He didn't cry. He just breathed again. After the service, a few church members approached shyly. A woman shook Ember's hand. "That song," she said, voice trembling. "It gave me hope today." Ember smiled. "I'm glad. That's what music's supposed to do." As they left, Ruth Ann linked arms with both of them. Now that, she said, was church. Back home, the mansion felt different. brighter, like someone had opened all the windows. Even Lydia, the strict house manager, seemed less stiff when she offered Ember tea. In the evening, Ruth Ann asked Ember to play piano in the sitting room. "It's been silent too long," she said. "Give the walls something to remember." Ember hesitated, then sat down. Her fingers touched the keys, hesitant at first, then sure. She played softly, a simple hymn her mother used to sing. Connor came in halfway through and leaned in the doorway, listening. His mother watched them both, eyes shining. When Ember finished, the room was still. Connor stepped closer, his voice barely a whisper. "I forgot how beautiful this house could sound." Ember turned. "It's not the house, it's the people in it." Something passed between them then, a quiet understanding, fragile and real. It wasn't part of the agreement. It wasn't part of any plan. It was simply there. Ruth Ann hid a smile behind her teacup. That night, Ember couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, looking out at the stars. Below, she saw the faint glow from Connor's office window. He was still awake. She thought about going down, then shook her head. He needed space, and so did she. But as she turned away from the window, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number flashed across the screen. "Enjoying your billionaire fairy tale. Don't forget where you came from." Her stomach twisted. She knew that tone. It was from her old supervisor, the one who'd lied about her at the social services office, costing her job and reputation. The past she'd tried to bury was clawing its way back. Downstairs, Connor's phone buzzed too. Marla had sent a message with a single line. "You need to see this before the gala." She'd attached a link to a gossip site with the headline, "Who is Ember Johnson, troubled past of the billionaire's mystery girl?" Connor clicked it, and his blood ran cold. The article dredged up false accusations, half-truths, and lies. Words like fired, embezzlement, and scam artist flashed across the screen. He stared at the photo beneath it, Ember smiling at the shelter, surrounded by children, and felt anger surge. Not at her, but at the cruelty of a world that punished kindness. He didn't sleep that night either. By morning, the mansion was too quiet. Ember came downstairs to find the kitchen empty. No Harold, no Ruth Ann, only Marla waiting with a tight smile and a phone in her hand. "You've seen it, haven't you?" Marla said. Ember frowned. "Seen what?" Marla slid the phone across the counter. Ember's heart sank as she read the headline. "Oh no, I told him to expect this." Marla said coolly. "The world doesn't forgive people like you, it eats them." Ember swallowed hard. "Those accusations were false. I was cleared, doesn't matter." Marla interrupted. "Truth moves slower than gossip, and gossip already won." Ember stepped back. "Where's Connor?" "In his office," Marla said. "Probably deciding whether keeping you around is worth the fallout." Ember's throat tightened. "He wouldn't." Marla's expression softened slightly, but her tone stayed sharp. "He likes you. That's obvious. But you should go before the cameras do." Ember didn't wait. She turned and ran upstairs, grabbed her coat, and packed her few things. When she came back down, Ruth Ann met her at the bottom of the stairs. "Leaving already?" Ruth Ann asked gently. Ember blinked back tears. "It's better this way. I don't want to ruin his name." Ruth Ann touched her cheek. "You can't ruin what you didn't build. But if you walk away now, child, you'll break something he was just beginning to fix." "I already did," Ember whispered, and turned towards the door. As she stepped out into the cold, Ruth Ann's voice followed her softly. "Don't run from grace, Ember. It always finds a way back." The heavy doors closed behind her, and the sound echoed through the empty hall. Upstairs, Connor came rushing down seconds too late, her note still in his hand. He opened the front door, but she was gone. Snow was falling again. The snow fell harder that night, turning the city streets into rivers of white. Ember's boots crunched against the sidewalk as she walked with her small bag slung over her shoulder. She didn't look back at the mansion. She couldn't. The thought of Ruth Ann's kind eyes and Connor's voice calling her name made her chest ache. The air was so cold it burned, but the ache in her heart hurt more than the wind ever could. She pulled her scarf higher over her face and whispered to herself, "It's better this way." But even as she said it, she didn't believe it. By the time Ember reached the downtown district, her hands were stiff and her cheeks red. She ducked into a diner that stayed open late, hoping to warm up and gather her thoughts. The bell over the door jingled, and the smell of frying bacon and coffee wrapped around her like a blanket. A waitress with kind eyes brought her a cup of hot chocolate without asking. "You look like you need something warm," she said softly. Ember smiled faintly. "You have no idea." She sat in the booth by the window and stared at the small stack of bills in her pocket. It wasn't much, barely enough for a few nights in a cheap motel. She could go back to the shelter, but she didn't want to face everyone's questions. They'd seen her pictures in the news. The thought made her stomach twist. She glanced up at the TV above the counter. Her heart stopped. There she was, on the screen next to Connor's photo. The reporter's voice was calm but cold. "Connor Wycliffe's mystery woman has been identified as Ember Johnson, a former social worker who was fired 2 years ago after allegations of theft from her department. Sources claim she's been homeless ever since. Neither Wycliffe nor his representatives have responded to requests for comment." Ember stared at the screen until the waitress turned it off with an awkward smile. "Don't believe everything they say on TV, honey." But the damage was already done. The whispers from nearby tables began, soft, pitying, curious. Ember rose quietly, dropped a few coins on the counter, and walked out. The cold wind hit her again, but this time it felt different. Lonelier. Back at the mansion, Connor sat at his desk, hands buried in his hair. The article glowed on the screen in front of him. His phone buzzed non-stop, messages from investors, reporters, Marla. He didn't answer any of them. When the door creaked open, Ruth Ann entered slowly, wrapped in her shawl. "She's gone, isn't she?" Connor looked up, eyes hollow. "She left a note. She said she didn't want to ruin me." Ruth Ann's voice broke gently. "And you let her believe that?" He shook his head, voice shaking. "I tried to find her. I was 2 minutes too late." "Then you'll find her now," Ruth Ann said simply. "You're not the type to sit and do nothing." Connor pushed the laptop away. "Mum, this could destroy everything. The company's stock is already falling. Investors are threatening to back out. Marcus called this morning to tell me to clean up my personal image." Ruth Ann crossed the room, her footsteps soft but firm. "You've spent years building a world made of glass, Connor. Maybe it's time to build one that can't break." He looked up at her. "You think I should chase her?" "I think you should follow your heart before it forgets how to lead." Meanwhile, Ember found refuge at the small church downtown. Pastor Sam recognized her instantly when she stepped through the doors, shivering. "Ember!" he said, rushing forward. "Good heavens, child, you look frozen. Come inside, there's soup in the kitchen." She tried to smile, but couldn't. "I just need somewhere to sit, just for a while." "Sit anywhere you like," he said kindly. "The Lord's house doesn't close." She sank into the back pew, her bag beside her. The stained glass windows glowed faintly in the candlelight, painting the floor in colors. She stared at the pulpit and thought about the last few weeks. The fake kiss that started everything, the laughter at the mansion, Ruth Ann's prayers, Connor's eyes when he listened to her sing. It felt like another lifetime. "I was doing fine on my own," she whispered, her breath trembling in the cold air. Why did you have to give me hope again, just to take it away? But deep down, she knew the answer. Hope wasn't taken. It was tested. Still, that didn't make the loneliness easier. Connor didn't sleep that night. At dawn, he met Harold in the garage, already in his coat. "Going somewhere, sir?" Harold asked, though he already knew. "I'm finding her," Connor said, "before the world destroys her name." Harold nodded once. "I'll drive." They spent the day searching. Every shelter, every diner, every street corner Ember might have gone to. Connor showed her picture again and again, to strangers, volunteers, shopkeepers. Some recognized her face but didn't know where she'd gone. By afternoon, snow turned to sleet, and the city's grey streets glistened with ice. Connor's phone buzzed again. Marcus this time. He ignored it, but the voicemail came seconds later. "Connor, you need to think rationally. You can't save everyone who wanders into your life. Cut her loose before she ruins you." He deleted it without listening to the rest. By evening, he'd reached the church. It was the last place on his list. He hesitated at the door, unsure why his heart pounded so hard. Inside, the pews were half lit by candlelight. Pastor Sam was tidying hymnals when Connor entered. "Excuse me," Connor said. "I'm looking for someone. Ember Johnson." The pastor smiled faintly. "You just missed her. She came in early this morning, stayed a few hours. She left some blankets for the outreach group. Didn't say where she was headed." Connor's shoulders slumped. "Do you know if she's okay?" Pastor Sam studied him. "You're the man from the news, aren't you?" Connor nodded. "She's hurting, son," the pastor said gently. "But she's not lost. She's just waiting to be found the right way." Connor swallowed hard. "She doesn't want my help. She thinks she's protecting me." The pastor smiled. "Then prove her wrong, not with words, with action." Connor nodded slowly. "Thank you." As he turned to leave, the pastor called after him. "If you find her, tell her the church kitchen's always open, and tell her we missed her voice." Ember spent that night helping serve soup in the same church basement, unaware that Connor had stood in the sanctuary hours earlier. She tied her hair back and ladled bowls of stew for the line of tired faces. It felt right being there, quiet, useful, safe. One of the volunteers smiled. "You sing, don't you? Pastor says you've got a gift." Ember blushed. "I used to. Not sure I have much to sing about lately." The woman handed her another ladle. "Then sing for us anyway. The people need hope. And maybe you do too." Ember hesitated, then began softly, her voice trembling at first, then growing stronger. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound. Heads turned. Smiles broke through the exhaustion. A few voices joined her by the second verse. When she finished, there were tears in several eyes, including her own. The woman beside her whispered, "See, still a gift." Ember smiled weakly. Maybe just borrowed from heaven. That same night, at the mansion, Ruth Ann's health took a turn. The stress of the week had worn her down. Lydia found her collapsed in the sitting room, a half-folded blanket still in her lap. By the time Connor got the call, he was halfway across town. He rushed back, heart pounding, and sat by her hospital bed until dawn. Ruth Ann woke briefly, her hand cold in his. "You found her yet?" "Not yet," he said. "Then go," she whispered. "Don't wait until it's too late for both of you." Her eyes fluttered shut again, and the monitor beeped steadily. Connor leaned forward, his voice breaking. "I'll bring her home, Mom, I promise." He pressed a kiss to her forehead and stood, resolve hardening like steel. The snow kept falling as the morning sun rose over the city, pale and weak. Somewhere downtown, a woman with a tired heart was pouring coffee for strangers and finding her way back to purpose. Somewhere else, a man with a broken past was learning that faith wasn't about reputation, it was about courage. Neither knew it yet, but their paths were already bending back toward each other. And when they met again, it wouldn't be by accident. It would be grace, doing what grace always does, finding what was lost. Morning came grey and cold again, the kind of morning that made the whole city move slower. Ember stood in the kitchen of the little downtown church, rolling up her sleeves as steam from the soup pot fogged the windows. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, but her spirit felt lighter than it had in days. The gossip, the lies, the headlines. She couldn't control them. But here, in this basement full of weary faces and kind hands, none of that mattered. Here she was just Ember again. "Smells good today," Pastor Sam said, stepping through the swinging door with his kind smile. "Your cooking's been keeping folks coming back." Ember laughed softly. "I think they just come for the warmth." He grinned. Same thing. Warm food, warm heart. As the volunteers lined up to serve, Ember ladled soup into a bowl for an older man with a scruffy beard. "Morning, Mr. Tyrrell," she said. He winked. "You sound happier today, girl." "I think I am." He chuckled. "Good. The world's already too heavy. Don't let it sit on your shoulders alone." Ember nodded, her heart swelling a little. The words reminded her of something Ruth Ann might have said. She tried not to think about the mansion, the quiet halls, Ruth Ann's soft laughter, Connor's voice asking if she'd sing again. The memory still hurt too much. Outside, snow swirled like ash against the church's stained glass windows. The day passed quickly. Bowl after bowl, smile after smile. Ember worked until her arms ached. When the last guest left and the kitchen fell silent, she took a deep breath and looked around at the empty tables. A sense of peace washed over her. Then the door opened. A gust of cold air swept in, scattering paper napkins across the floor. Ember turned, expecting another volunteer. But when she saw who it was, the ladle slipped from her hand and clattered into the sink. Connor Wycliffe stood in the doorway, his coat dusted with snow, his eyes searching the room like he wasn't sure it was real. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the steady hum of the heater and the faint drip of soup from the ladle. He stepped forward slowly. "I've been looking for you." Ember's throat went dry. "You shouldn't have come here." "I had to." She shook her head, backing up a little. "You don't belong in a place like this." He gave a soft, tired smile. "Neither did you, but you made it better." She opened her mouth, but the words tangled. All the reasons she'd left, protecting his name, avoiding scandal, sparing him, sounded small now that he was standing in front of her. Connor's eyes were red-rimmed, the kind that came from too many sleepless nights. "My mother's in the hospital," he said quietly. "She wants to see you." Ember's heart clenched. She's holding on?" he said. "She told me not to wait until it was too late to make things right." Ember looked down at her hands. "Connor, the world thinks awful things about me. If you bring me back now, they'll—" "I don't care what they think," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "They don't know you. They don't know what you've done, who you are, or what you've taught me." Her eyes filled with tears. "And what did I teach you?" He took another step closer. "That money can't buy peace. That forgiveness isn't something you earn, it's something you live. That even when you're lost, you can still choose love." Ember covered her mouth, a sob escaping before she could stop it. "You don't have to say these things." "I do," he said firmly, "because they're true." The volunteers who had been cleaning paused at the doorway, watching quietly. Pastor Sam stood at the back, smiling faintly like a man who'd seen this kind of miracle before. Ember wiped her eyes. "I left to protect you." Connor shook his head. "You didn't ruin me, Ember. You saved me. You showed me how to be human again." Her voice was barely a whisper. "And what about everything they're saying?" He stepped forward until they were only inches apart. "Let them talk. The truth doesn't need a press release." For the first time in weeks, Ember laughed through her tears. "You sound like your mother. She's a wise woman," he said softly. "And she wants to see you." Ember hesitated, torn between fear and hope. Then Pastor Sam's voice came gently from behind her. "Grace doesn't knock twice, dear." That settled it. Ember nodded slowly. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's go." Connor let out a breath of relief and held out his hand. "Together?" She took it. The small crowd of volunteers clapped quietly, a few wiping their eyes. As they turned to leave, Ember paused, looking back at the kitchen one last time. The smell of soup and warmth filled her chest with peace. Pastor Sam called after them. "Remember, young lady, when God closes one door, he usually opens one with a better view." Ember smiled. "I think he already did." The hospital was quiet except for the steady hum of machines and the muffled sounds of footsteps in the hall. Ruth Ann lay resting in a pale blue gown, her breathing shallow but steady. When the door opened, her eyes fluttered open. "Well," she said weakly, a faint smile curling her lips. "I knew you'd find her." Ember rushed to her bedside. "Mrs. Wycliffe, Ruth Ann," she corrected softly, taking Ember's hand. "I've been praying you'd come back." Ember knelt beside her. "I didn't want to make things worse." Ruth Ann's smile deepened. "Child, you didn't make things worse. You made things real." Tears slid down Ember's cheeks. "I'm so sorry for all of it." Ruth Ann squeezed her hand with surprising strength. "Don't you dare apologize for being brave enough to love." Connor stood behind them, silent, watching the two women who had changed his life more than anyone else ever could. Ruth Ann glanced up at her son, her voice thin but steady. "You see, Connor, this is what grace looks like. It doesn't come wrapped in gold. It walks in with empty hands and a heart full of faith." He swallowed hard. "I know, Mum." "Good," she whispered, closing her eyes. "Then promise me something. Both of you." Ember leaned closer. "Anything. Don't waste the rest of your lives pretending. Love the way God meant you to." She drifted back into sleep, her hand still holding Ember's. Connor's eyes met Ember's over the hospital bed. No words passed between them, but they didn't need any. The silence said everything. The apology, the forgiveness, the beginning. They stood there until the sun dipped low, painting the window in gold and pink. Outside the hospital, the city lights flickered on one by one. Connor walked Ember to the car but didn't open the door right away. The air between them buzzed with things left unsaid. "She'll be okay," Ember said quietly, trying to convince both of them. He nodded. "She's stronger than anyone I know." For a long moment, they stood there in the cold, their breath turning to mist between them. Connor finally spoke. "When I walked into that church and saw you again, I realized something." "What's that?" "I stopped pretending the day I met you," he said. "I just didn't realize it until now." Ember smiled softly, tears glinting in her eyes. "Then maybe it's time to stop pretending altogether." Connor reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "No cameras this time," he said quietly. "Just us." She nodded. "Just us." And for the first time since that night in the snow, When a desperate man had begged a stranger for a 10-minute favor, they leaned into each other, not for the world, not for headlines, not for anyone, watching, but because this time it was real. Their kiss was gentle and true, the kind that carried warmth enough to melt even the coldest winter. Inside the hospital, Ruth Ann smiled in her sleep, as though she knew the moment grace had finally done its work. The next morning dawned clear for the first time in weeks. The sky stretched pale blue over the city, and the storm that had painted the streets in snow had finally passed. Inside the hospital room, sunlight pooled through the blinds and lay soft over Ruth Ann's blanket. Ember sat beside her, fingers curled around the older woman's hand, watching her chest rise and fall in peaceful rhythm. Ruth Ann stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. "Still here?" she whispered. Ember smiled. "Not going anywhere." "Good," Ruth Ann murmured, squeezing her hand faintly. "That boy of mine's been pacing like a lion all morning." Ember laughed softly. "He's not used to sitting still." Ruth Ann smiled faintly. "He gets that from his father. Always fixing, never resting. But now, I think he's learning that love fixes more than money ever could." Before Ember could answer, the door opened quietly. Connor stepped in carrying a paper bag from the cafe downstairs. He looked tired, but there was light in his eyes again. "Brought breakfast," he said, setting the bag on the table. "Doctor says you're doing better, Mom." Ruth Ann raised an eyebrow. "Of course I am. I had a visitor from heaven." Connor chuckled. "She's not an angel, Mom." "Maybe not," Ruth Ann said, glancing at Ember with warmth. "But she's close enough for me." The nurse came in to check vitals, smiling as she worked. "You've got quite the family here, Mrs. Wycliffe," she said kindly. Ruth Ann chuckled. "Don't I know it?" When she left, the room fell into comfortable silence. Connor pulled a chair closer to Ember and handed her a cup of coffee. "You probably didn't sleep." She shook her head. "Didn't want to." He sipped his own coffee and looked at her for a long moment. "I thought about something you said once. How pretending can turn into truth if you let it." Ember met his gaze. "That was before everything fell apart." He nodded. "But maybe things have to fall apart before they can fall into place." She smiled softly. "You sound like Pastor Sam." "Smart man," Connor said. They both laughed quietly, the sound filling the small hospital room like sunlight after rain. Ruth Ann stirred again, her voice soft but steady. "You two keep talking like that and people will start thinking you've got plans." Connor glanced at her, then back at Ember. "Maybe I do." Ember blinked. "Connor." He reached for her hand. "I've spent years building things that didn't last. Companies, deals, plans, all of it could vanish in a headline. But what I've found with you, that's real. That's what I want to build on." Ember felt her throat tighten. "You don't even know if I'm staying." He smiled faintly. "Then I'll just have to give you a reason to." Ruth Ann smiled, eyes twinkling. "Oh, child, don't make him work too hard. He's new at this whole love thing." Ember laughed through tears. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly. "Not if you really mean that." "I've never meant anything more," he said. They sat together in silence, fingers intertwined as the morning light grew brighter. For the first time since that snowy night under the hotel awning, Ember felt completely at peace. A week later, Ruth Ann was discharged and brought home. The mansion looked different somehow, warmer, lived in. The staff smiled more. Lydia even baked cookies and left a plate for Ember with a note that simply said, "Thank you for bringing the light back." Ember spent the afternoons reading aloud to Ruth Ann, while Connor worked beside them, laptop open, but mostly forgotten. The world outside still buzzed with rumors and headlines, but neither of them paid it much mind. When a reporter caught them leaving the hospital one day and shouted, "Miss Johnson, are you staying with Mr. Wycliffe?" Ember only smiled and said, "I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." The clip went viral again, but this time it wasn't mockery. It was hope. Across the country, comments flooded in, people talking about grace, second chances, love that didn't care about status. The story that had started with scandal ended up becoming something far different. That spring, Connor launched the Ruth Ann Foundation, named after his mother, with Ember at his side as co-founder. Their first mission was simple: rebuild and expand the homeless shelter where Ember had once volunteered. At the opening ceremony, Denise hugged Ember so tight she could hardly breathe. "Never thought I'd see the day," she said, eyes glistening. "You came back to us for good." Ember smiled, voice thick with emotion. "I never really left." Connor spoke briefly to the gathered crowd. "This foundation began because one person reminded me that everyone deserves warmth, dignity, and a chance to start over. That one act of kindness can rewrite a life." He paused, then turned toward Ember with a smile that made her heart swell. "In my case, it rewrote too." Applause rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed, but this time Ember didn't shy away. She stood tall, not as the mystery woman, but as herself, whole, healed, home. That evening, the three of them, Connor, Ember, and Ruth Ann, sat together in the mansion's back garden as the sun sank behind the hills. The air smelled of lilacs and fresh earth. Ruth Ann, wrapped in a shawl, watched them with tired but happy eyes. "Look at that sky," she murmured. "Almost looks like heaven couldn't wait to get a glimpse of you two." Connor chuckled. "Don't start matchmaking from beyond, Mom." Ruth Ann smirked. "Who says I'm waiting for beyond?" They all laughed, and Ember leaned her head against Connor's shoulder. "I used to pray just to survive another day," she said quietly. "Now I pray to make every one of them count." He kissed the top of her head. "You already have." The church bells in the distance began to chime, soft and slow. 10 strikes. Ember lifted her face to the sound and smiled through tears. 10 minutes, she whispered. "That's all it took." Connor looked down at her. 10 minutes? "That night," she said. "You asked me to pretend for 10 minutes, but God took those minutes and made forever." Connor pulled her closer, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Then let's make forever count." Ruth Ann closed her eyes, listening to their laughter. Her breathing slowed, her smile peaceful. She rested her hands in her lap, the golden light of sunset washing over her face. Weeks later, on a bright April morning, the mansion filled with the scent of flowers and fresh-baked bread. The church bells rang again, this time for celebration. In a small ceremony in Ruth Ann's garden, Connor and Ember exchanged vows under a white arch of lilies and ivy. Denise and Pastor Sam stood beside them, Ruth Ann's chair placed at the front, empty now but adorned with her favorite shawl and a single rose. When Connor said "I do," his voice caught on the last word. When Ember said it back, her voice shook but didn't break. They sealed it with a kiss. No cameras, no pretending, no storm. Just two souls who had finally learned what grace meant. As they walked down the garden path hand in hand, sunlight spilling over the lawn, Ember looked up at the sky and whispered a quiet thank you. That night, long after the guests had gone, the house glowed with soft lamplight. Connor sat with Ember by the fireplace, the same one where she'd once prayed for courage. Outside, crickets sang, and the world felt gentle. He brushed his thumb over her hand. "It's funny," he said. "Everything started because I was running from the truth." Ember smiled. And you ran straight into it. He laughed softly. Guess God's got a sense of humor. She leaned against him, eyes half closed. If he didn't, he wouldn't have put us together. Connor wrapped an arm around her and looked into the fire. 10 minutes, he said. That's all it took to change my life. Ember smiled, her voice tender and sure. And forever to keep it. They sat there as the fire crackled, two souls who had once been lost finding home in each other. The clock ticked softly on the mantel, marking time not as loss, but as love unfolding, minute by minute, grace by grace, forever after all. Spring had rolled gently into summer, and the city no longer felt cold. The sharp edges of winter had softened, replaced by blooming trees and the hum of life returning. Ember stood outside the new Ruth Ann Foundation, center, watching as children raced across the courtyard, their laughter echoing off the freshly painted walls. The building, once an empty warehouse, now pulsed with warmth and purpose. Food, counseling, beds, and love were given freely here. It was everything she had once needed and everything she had once prayed for. A plaque near the entrance read, "In honor of Ruth Ann Wycliffe, who believed every soul deserves a place to begin again." Ember touched it every morning before unlocking the doors. It reminded her that miracles often started small, like a single kind word, a simple meal, or even a kiss meant to last 10 minutes. Inside, the kitchen buzzed with energy. Denise directed volunteers while Harold carried boxes of canned food, still cracking jokes. Pastor Sam sat near the back table with a cup of tea, helping a young man fill out a job application. The whole place smelled of soup and sunshine. When Ember walked in, Denise grinned. "Our fearless leader has arrived. You know, you're worse than Connor. You never take a break." Ember laughed. "If I stop moving, I'll start crying." "That's okay too," Denise said, smiling softly. "Happy tears water the good stuff." Connor arrived a little later, sleeves rolled, tie loose, the same mixture of confidence and humility he'd worn since he learned how to breathe again. The children ran to him, tugging at his hands, shouting his name. He lifted one onto his shoulders, laughing like a man who had never forgotten what joy felt like. Ember stood watching, her heart full. This was the man she'd met in the snow, but now he was the man he was meant to be. When the crowd quieted, Connor joined her near the entrance. "You've outworked everyone again," he teased. "Just trying to keep up with you." She replied. He smiled. "Not possible. You passed me months ago." They walked together through the hall, past the murals the children had painted. Bright handprints, verses of hope, and one small inscription that made them both pause. "Grace found me here." Connor traced the words with his fingertips. She really did, didn't she? Ember looked up at him, eyes soft. She always does. We just have to stop running long enough to notice. Outside, the afternoon sun dipped lower, turning the windows gold. The volunteers began packing up for the day, and soon the shelter quieted. Ember and Connor stood on the steps, watching the city lights flicker to life one by one. "You ever think about that night?" he asked. "All the time," she said. "You asked me to pretend for 10 minutes. He nodded, smiling faintly. "And now here we are, years later." "Pretending's long over," she said, leaning against his shoulder. He slipped an arm around her. "Good, because this—" He gestured to the glowing building, the laughter still echoing from inside. "This feels real enough for forever." She rested her head on his chest, breathing in the quiet peace between them. "Funny," she murmured, "how God uses broken people to build something whole." Connor looked out at the horizon. "I used to think redemption was a word for other people, But then you walked into my storm and didn't leave." She smiled. "You gave me a place to stand. And you gave me a reason to kneel," he said softly. The wind carried the faint sound of church bells from somewhere downtown, the same ones that had rung on their wedding day. The moment felt still and sacred. Ember turned to face him, her eyes shining in the golden light. "Do you ever miss the life you had before?" Connor shook his head. "Not for a second. The man I was then couldn't have seen the beauty standing in front of him now." She laughed, tears glinting. "You always did have a way with words." He took her hands. "No," he said gently. "I just finally learned to tell the truth." They stood there as dusk settled, the world quiet around them. From the shelter windows spilled the warm light of lamps, soft and steady, the kind that didn't chase away darkness, but transformed it. Ember looked up at the glowing sign one last time before they turned to go. "Think she'd be proud of us?" she asked. Connor followed her gaze to the plaque. "She already is," he said. "She's the reason we found our way home." Hand in hand, they walked down the steps and into the twilight. The streetlights blinked on, one by one, like tiny promises keeping watch over the city. Behind them, the foundation doors closed for the night, but the warmth within never dimmed. For some, grace came as thunder or light. For Ember and Connor, it came as a whisper in the snow, a reminder that love, once found, could turn even 10 borrowed minutes into forever. Autumn came softly that year. The trees around the Wycliffe estate turned gold and red, their leaves swirling across the long driveway like tiny miracles that refused to stay still. Ember sat on the back porch wrapped in a shawl, a cup of tea warming her hands. From where she sat, she could see the foundation building in the distance, its windows glowing even as evening crept in. Laughter carried on the breeze, children, volunteers, music. It was the sound of life continuing, the kind Ruth Ann always said would keep the heart young. Connor stepped outside, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He set one beside her and leaned on the porch railing, watching the sunset paint the sky. "Still your favorite view?" he asked. Ember smiled. "Always. Every color feels like a thank you." He looked at her with quiet admiration. "You still pray like that?" She nodded. "Every morning. Every night. I thank God that we got another day to make something good." Connor sat beside her. "I thank him too," he said, "mostly for you." They sat in peaceful silence for a moment, listening to the wind rustle through the trees. Inside the house, faint piano music drifted from the living room. Ruth Ann's old hymn recordings, now digitized and playing softly every evening, as if her spirit still filled every corner of their home. Ember leaned her head on his shoulder. "I wish she could see how far we've come." Connor smiled faintly. "She sees. Every time a family finds shelter, every time a child laughs, she's right there. That was her dream before it became ours." Ember closed her eyes, tears warm against the chill air. She always believed love could heal anything. And she was right. He whispered, "It healed me." They stayed that way for a while, the orange light fading into purple, the world growing still. After a while, Ember rose and walked to the garden's edge where Ruth Ann's rose bush bloomed, its petals pale pink even in the cooling air. She touched one gently, smiling. Connor joined her, slipping his hand into hers. "Do you remember that night?" he asked softly. "The hotel, the snow, the 10 minutes?" Ember laughed through her tears. "How could I forget? You looked like a man drowning." "I was," he said, "and then you said yes." She looked at him, eyes glistening. "I didn't know it then. But that yes saved us both. They stood together, watching the last bit of sunlight fade behind the trees. Somewhere far away a church bell rang, slow, solemn, beautiful. Ember turned, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat beneath his coat. Connor whispered, "Do you ever wonder how long forever really is?" Ember smiled softly. "No," she said. "I just know it starts every morning we wake up and choose to love again." He kissed her forehead, pulling her close as twilight wrapped around them. The world seemed to hold its breath, quiet, peaceful, whole. And as the first stars appeared, Ember whispered, 10 minutes turned into forever, and forever still isn't long enough." Connor smiled, holding her hand tighter. "Then we'll make the most of every minute we've got." The porch light flickered on, spilling warm gold across the garden. The night deepened, soft and safe, carrying with it the kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt blessed. In the distance, laughter rose again from the foundation, proof that love, once found, never truly ends. And in that quiet, holy moment, they knew Ruth Ann had been right all along. Grace wasn't something you waited for. Grace was something you lived. If this story made you pause, reflect, or even smile, don't forget to subscribe. I post daily, and the next story might be exactly what you need to hear.